there's the river of God on the other side, and you know, all the problems are going to be washed away. It's true. But you're judged by the state before you enter the river. You see, you're going to have problems. You're born again, but you still have problems and get to heaven. Right? You still got hurts, memories, bad memories. None of those things can enter heaven. Because heaven is pure. There's not a bad memory anywhere. You know, you might remember things that people have done on the earth which has been bad. Once you get to heaven, you will have no memory of anything that anyone has done that's been bad while in the flesh. Aren't you glad about that? There's no negative thing in heaven. You see, these people come, and I've sat there in paradise and watched them. They come, and they come to the river. And they've got all kinds of problems, but they got into paradise. You know, they got into that place. And they go to the river. And that river is a spirit river. And they get into the river, sometimes sit for days in the river. Well, it washes out all the memories, all of the hurts, all of the problems, all of those things, and they come out of that river. They don't even have a memory of anything they've done wrong. They don't have any hurt anymore. It's all gone. But their state, their level in heaven is still being set. And I've watched them sit. Some of them take days to even touch the river. They feel so bad about their past life. Some of them need to stay in that river for weeks. He can breathe under it, you know. He swim in it. Washes it out. Washes it out. Hallelujah. Until they're pure. But the Bible tells us that the Lord Jesus Christ is coming from a pure, spotless, perfect church this side of glory. Now that's the issue. When he says, you know, he's coming for a perfect church, he means perfect. Perfectly whole. Clean, pure, whole, perfect bride. He's coming for that.
Buried with him in baptism, wherein also ye are risen with him through the faith of the operation of God, who hath raised him from the dead.
Blessed are the pure in heart. Hallelujah. You know, not everybody that goes to heaven, when dies and goes to heaven, gets to see the Father. Ever. Now, you're looking at me real strange. Many are limited just to paradise. That's it. That's where they live forever. They don't get any further into the city, to the temple. You say, well, paradise is a good place, you know, I'll settle for that. But there are other places in heaven beyond your imagination. You see? And people say, well, you know, when I get to heaven, I'll be perfect. True and false. Okay, true. You know, there is a river in heaven, and people die. They got all kinds of problems in their life, but they're born again, right? They're born again, but they get in by the skin of their teeth, right? Just like the thief on the cross, just got in by the skin of his teeth, right? They get into heaven. They've still got problems in their life. They've still got issues they've never dealt with. They've still got attitudes which are wrong and sinful. But they get into heaven. They get into paradise. And the angel says, all right. Takes a look at them and thinks, oh dear. Into the river. And that river washes out every bad memory. You cannot even remember anymore anything about anyone, even on the earth, on heaven, that's done anything bad to you. There's no bad. Washes and that washes out and it washes out until finally they come out of that river and they are clean. But they are limited to a level. They are pure, but they are limited. Some people spend weeks in that river, they're so bad. I tell you. I saw this, oh no, we won't get it. Oh, well, I saw this person who came in, and he wouldn't even go in the river. And the angels were trying to persuade him to go in the river, and he was in like a state of despair. And I said to the angel, what is the problem here? He said, this person murdered 15 people. He came to the Lord in his cell just before he was executed. He said, you're going to have to give him time. And when they finally got him into the river, he was there for days and days and days and days. Saved? Yes. But his eternal destiny was settled on that level.
Know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection.
Dream of Heaven. Rebecca Ruder Springer was 29 when the American Civil War started in 1861. When the war ended 5 years later, 620,000 soldiers and countless civilians lay dead. It is not surprising, therefore, that the dead and heaven were much considered over the next 40 years in the USA. My Dream of Heaven, written in 1898. There is not a great deal known about Rebecca Ruder Springer. She was born in 1832 in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the daughter of a Methodist clergyman. She graduated from Wesleyan Female College in 1850. In 1859, she married William Springer, who went on to become a lawyer and a member of the Illinois General Assembly. They had one son, also named William, but Rebecca's health was never good, and described by some as feeble. In 1868, the couple went on a 2-year European tour to improve her health, but it remained poor until her death. Springer did not bestow the status of prophecy on her work, but intended it as a comfort. It was a vision given her during a severe illness in which she was unconscious for some days. She said, I wrote the book with the hope that it would comfort and uplift those who read it, as its memory will ever do for me. I submit the imperfect sketch of a most perfect vision. Springer wrote several books, but is best remembered for My Dream of Heaven.
Chapter 1. I was many hundred miles away from home and friends, and had been very ill for many weeks. I was entirely among strangers, and my only attendant, though of a kindly disposition, knew nothing whatever of the duties of the sick room. Hence, I had none of the many delicate attentions that keep up an invalid's failing strength. I had taken no nourishment of any kind for nearly 3 weeks. I was greatly reduced in strength, and consciousness seemed at times to wholly desert me. During much of my illness, I lay with my face to this window and my back to the room. One morning, dark and cold and stormy, after a day and night of intense suffering, I seemed to be standing on the floor by the bed in front of the stained glass window. Someone was standing by me, and when I looked up, I saw it was my husband's favorite brother, Colonel Frank Sprague, who crossed the flood many years ago. "My dear brother Frank," I cried out joyously, "how good of you to come."
It was a great joy to me that I could do so, little sister. Shall we go now?
He drew me toward the window. I turned my head and looked back into the room that somehow I felt I was about to leave forever. It was in its usual good order, a cheery, pretty room. The attendant sat by the stove at the far end of the room reading a newspaper. On the bed lay a white, still form with the shadow of a smile on the poor, worn face. My brother pulled me gently, and I yielded, passing with him through the window, out onto the veranda, and in some unaccountable way, down to the street. There I paused and said, "Frank, I cannot leave Will and our dear boy. They will need me."
Yes, I know. But they will be here. Wouldn't it be better if I brought you back in a while, after they come?
Would you?
Most certainly, if you so desire. You're worn out with the long suffering, and a little rest would give you new strength.
I felt he was right, and we slowly started up the street. He had pulled my hand through his arm and endeavored to interest me as we walked. I stopped and looked wistfully back the way we had come. He was very patient and gentle with me, waiting always until I was ready to proceed again. But at last my hesitation was so great that he said pleasantly,
"You are so weak. I think I had better carry you."
And without waiting for a reply, he stooped and lifted me in his arms as though I had been a little child. And like a child, I yielded, resting my head on his shoulder and laying my arm around his neck. I felt so safe, so content to be in his care. He walked on with firm, swift steps, and I think I must have slept, for the next I knew, I was sitting in a sheltered nook made by flowering shrubs upon the softest and most beautiful turf of grass, thickly studded with fragrant flowers. Beneath the trees, in many happy groups, were little children, laughing and playing and running all around in pure joy, and catching in their tiny hands the bright-winged birds that flitted in and out among them, as though sharing in their sport, as they doubtless were. Look where I would, I saw, half hidden by the trees, elegant and beautiful houses of strangely attractive architecture that I felt must be the homes of the happy inhabitants of this enchanted place. I caught a glimpse of sparkling fountains in many directions, and close by a river with water clear as crystal. The walks that ran in many directions through the grounds appeared to me to be, and I afterward found were, of pearl, spotless and pure, bordered on either side by narrow streams of water running over stones of gold. The one thought that came to mind as I looked, breathless and speechless, was purity, purity. No shadow of dust, no taint of decay on the fruit or flowers, everything perfect, everything pure. As I drew in my breath with a short, quick gasp of delight, I heard my brother, who was standing beside me, say softly,
Well?
"Oh, Frank, when such an overpowering sense of God's goodness and my own unworthiness swept over me that I dropped my face into my hands and burst into uncontrollable and very human weeping. Lifting me gently to my feet, Frank said,
I'm inconsiderate. Come, I want to show you the river.
When we reached the brink of the river, I found the lovely grass ran to the water's edge, and in some places I saw flowers blooming down in the depths among the many colored pebbles that lined the riverbed. As my brother stepped into the water, he said,
I want you to see these beautiful stones.
I drew back timidly, saying, I fear it is cold. And with a reassuring smile, he said,
Not in the least. Come on in.
Just as I am, I said, glancing down at my lovely robe, which, to my great joy, I had found was similar to those of the dwellers in this happy place. With another reassuring smile, he said, Just as you are. Encouraged, I stepped into the gently flowing river, and to my great surprise, found the water, both in density and temperature, almost identical with the air. Deeper and deeper grew the stream as we continued until I felt the soft, sweet ripples playing around my throat. As I stopped, my brother said, A little farther still. It will go over my head.
Well, and what then?
I cannot breathe under the water. I will suffocate. An amused twinkle came into his eyes, though he said soberly enough,
We do not do those things here.
I realized the absurdity of my words, and with a happy laugh said, All right, let's go, and plunged headlong into the bright water, which soon bubbled and rippled several feet above my head. To my surprise and delight, I found I could not only breathe, but laugh and talk, see and hear, as naturally under the water as above it. I sat down in the midst of the many-colored pebbles and filled my hands with them as a child would have done. My brother lay down on them as he would have done on the grass and laughed and talked joyously with me. As he rubbed his hands over his face and ran his fingers through his dark hair, he said,
Do this.
I did as he told me, and the sensation was delightful. I threw back my loose sleeves and rubbed my arms, then my throat, thrust my fingers through my long, loose hair, thinking at the time what a tangle it would be when I left the water. And then the thought came, as we at last arose to return, what are we going to do for towels? For the earth thought still clung to me, and I wondered, too, if the lovely robe was not entirely spoiled. But behold, as we neared the shore, and my head once more emerged from the water, the moment the air struck my face and hair, I realized that I had no need of towel or brush. My flesh, my hair, even my beautiful garments were soft and dry, as before the water touched them. The material out of which my robe was fashioned was unlike anything that I had ever seen. It was soft and light and shone with a faint luster, reminding me more of silk crepe than anything I could recall, only infinitely more beautiful. It fell around me in soft, graceful folds, which the water seemed to have made even more lustrous than before. What marvelous water! What wonderful air! I said to my brother as we again stepped upon the flowery grass. Are all the rivers like this one? He replied,
Not just the same, but similar.
As we walked on a few steps, I turned and looked back at the shining river flowing on tranquilly. Frank, "What has that water done for me?" I said. "I feel as though I could fly." He looked at me with earnest, tender eyes as he answered gently,
"It has washed away the last of the earth life and fitted you for the new life into which you have entered."
It is divine.
Yes, it is divine.
Chapter 6. As time passed, and I grew more accustomed to the heavenly life around me, I found its loveliness unfold to me like the slow opening of a rare flower. Delightful surprises met me at every turn. A dear friend, with whom I had parted ways years ago in the earth life, would come unexpectedly to me with cordial greetings. But the most wonderful to me was the occasional meeting with someone whom I had never hoped to meet over there, who, with eager handshake and tearful eyes, would pour out his earnest thanks for some helpful word, some solemn warning, or even some stern rebuke that had turned him, all unknown to myself, from the paths of sin into the life everlasting. Oh, the joy to me of such a revelation. Oh, the regret that my earth life had not been more full of such work for eternity. Daily my first impulse on awaking from happy, blissful rest was to walk to the river of life and plunge into its wonderful waters, so refreshing, so invigorating, so inspiring. With a heart full of thanksgiving and lips full of praise, morning after morning, sometimes in the company of my brother, sometimes alone, I returned always full of new life and hope and purpose to our home. Each day I listened to the entrancing revelations and instruction of my brother. One morning, soon after my return from a first visit to earth, as I was on the way to the river, my voice joined in to a wonderful anthem of praise sounding everywhere. I saw a lovely young girl approaching me quickly with outstretched arms.
"Dear Aunt Bertha, do you know me?"
"My little May?" I cried, gathering this dainty creature into my arms. "Where did you come from so suddenly? Let me look at you again." Holding her a moment at arm's length, only to hug her again tenderly. "You have grown up so very beautiful. I'm sure I can say this to you freely. You were always lovely. You are simply radiant now. Is it this divine life?"
"Yes,"
she said sweetly.
"but most of all the being near the Savior so much."
"Ah, yes, that is it. Being near him. That will make any being radiant and beautiful," I said.
"He is so good to me, so generous, so tender, and he seems to forget how little I have done to deserve his care."
"I'm sure he knows you love him, dear heart. That means everything to him. Come with me to the river, May," I said. After we had talked for some time, "come with me for a delightful plunge."
"Gladly,"
she said.
"But have you ever been to the lake or the sea?"
"The lake or sea?" I echoed. "No, indeed. Is there a lake and a sea here?"
"Certainly there are,"
said May with a little pride that she should know more of the heavenly surroundings than I.
"Shall we go to the lake today and leave the sea for another day? Which will it be?"
"Let it be the lake today," I said. So, turning in an entirely different direction from the path that led to the river, we walked joyously on, still talking as we went. So much to recall, so much to look forward to with joy. She had grown so womanly, so wise, this child of tender years, since we parted, that it was a joy to talk with her. I told her of my sad errand to earth, and the sorrow of the dear ones I had left.
Yes, I know it all,
she whispered.
But it will not be long to wait. They will come soon. It never seems long to wait for anything here. There's always so much to keep one busy, so many pleasant duties, so many joys. Oh, it will not be long.
So she cheered and comforted me as we walked through the ever-changing and always perfect landscape. At times she lifted her arm and, pointing with her rosy fingers, said,
"Behold, is this not divinely beautiful?"
I caught my breath and stopped abruptly, covering my face with my hands to shield my eyes from the glorified scene. Oh, no wonder Frank hadn't brought me to this place sooner. I was not yet spiritually strong enough to look upon it. When I again slowly lifted my head, May was standing like someone entranced. The golden morning light rested on her face and mingled with the radiance that had given birth within. It almost transfigured her. Even May, who had so long lived here, had not yet grown accustomed to seeing its glory. The lake spread before us, as smooth as glass, but flooded with a golden glory caught from the heavens that made it like a sea of molten gold. The blossom and fruit-bearing trees grew down to its very border in many places, and far, far away across its shining waters arose the domes and spires of what seemed to be a mighty city. Many people were resting on its flowery banks, and on the surface of the water were boats of wonderful structure, filled with happy souls of singing cherubs, floating high above, drifted across the lake. Their baby voices could be heard in notes of joyful praise.
"Come, Auntie, rest."
I yielded to her as I could not do otherwise. She led me into the water, down into its crystal depths, when it seemed to me we must be hundreds of feet beneath the surface. She laid down and asked me to do the same. I did, and immediately we began to slowly rise. Soon I found that we no longer rose, but we were slowly floating in mid-current, many feet beneath the surface. Then I saw what seemed to be a marvel. Perfect prismatic rays surrounded me. I seemed to be resting in the heart of a prism. There was such vivid yet delicate coloring, the likes of which I had never seen. Instead of the 7 colors as we see them on Earth, the colors blended in such rare gradation of shades as if to make the rays seem almost infinite. Or they really were infinite. I couldn't decide which. As I lay watching this marvelous panorama, the colors deepened and faded like the lights of the aurora borealis, and I heard the distant sound of music. Although May and I were not touching one another, we didn't drift apart as one would suppose we might. We lay within easy speaking distance of each other, though few words were spoken between us. The silence seemed too sacred to be broken. We lay within the water as if on the softest couch. It required no effort whatsoever to keep ourselves afloat. The gentle undulation of the waves soothed and rested us. And when the distant music caught my attention again, I turned and looked at May. She smiled back at me but did not speak. Soon I caught the words, "Glory and honor, dominion and power." And I knew it was still the cherub choir, although they must be miles away now. Then the soft tones of a bell, a silver bell with a silver tongue, sounded and as the last notes died away, I whispered, "Tell me about all this, May." She explained, "The waters of this lake catch the light in a most incredible manner, as you have seen. A wiser head than mine must tell you why. The water also transmits musical sounds, only musical sounds, for a great distance. The song was evidently from a distant shore of the lake." "And the bell?" "That is the bell in the city across the lake that calls people to certain duties at this hour." "Well, there was never a sweeter call to duty," I said. "Yes, its notes are beautiful. Listen now, there is a chime ringing." We laid and listened, and as we listened, a sweet spell wrapped itself around me, and I slept as peacefully as a child on its mother's bosom. I awoke with a strange sense of invigoration and strength. It was a feeling quite different from the feeling I experienced during a bath in the river, yet I could not explain how it was different. May said,
"One takes away the last of the earth life and prepares us for the life here in heaven. The other fills us to overflowing from the celestial life itself."
So we talked and walked, and she told me the history of her years in heaven, her duties, her joys, her friends, her home. Chapter 15. The current of my life flowed on in the heavenly ways until the months began to lengthen into years, and my daily studies ascended higher in the scale of celestial mysteries. I never wearied of study, though much was taught and gained through the medium of observation on the journeys that I was permitted to take with my brother into different parts of the heavenly kingdom. I never lacked time for social pleasures and enjoyments, for there is no clashing of duties, no unfulfilled desires, no vain strivings for the unattainable in that life as in the life of earth. Many precious hours of discussion were spent in my dear father's home, and sometimes on rare occasions I was permitted to accompany him to his field of labor and assist him in instructing those lately come into the new life with little or no preparation for its duties and responsibilities. On one occasion, he said to me,
"I have the most difficult problem to deal with I have yet met in this book. It is how to enlighten and help a man who is suddenly plunged from an apparently honorable life into the depths of crime. I have never been able to get him to accompany me to the river where these earthly cobwebs would be swept from his poor brain, his excuse always being that God's mercy is so great in allowing him inside heaven's gates at all, that he is content to remain always in its lowest scale of enjoyment and life. No argument or teaching so far could make him alter his decision. He was led astray by infatuation for a strange woman and killed his aged mother in order to secure her jewels for this wretched creature. He was executed for the crime, of which in the end he sincerely repented, but he loved life with all the horror of the deed clinging to his soul."
Has he seen his mother since coming here? Does she know of his arrival? No, she is entirely alone in this world, and it was not thought wise to tell her of his coming until his soul was in a better condition to receive her. He was an only child and has all the elements of refinement, but he was completely under the control of this vile, though fascinating woman. It is said that she drugged his wine and incited him to do the dreadful deed while under its influence because of her hatred for his mother, who influenced him against her. When he came out from under the influence of the wine, he was horrified at what he had done, and his infatuation for the woman turned to loathing. But alas, too late. He refused to see her during his entire incarceration. How long was he in prison?
Almost a year.
Has he seen the Christ?
No, he begs not to see him. He is very repentant and grateful to be saved from the wrath he feels was his just punishment. But though he is conscious that his sin is forgiven, he does not yet feel that he can ever stand in the presence of the Holy One. And here, as upon earth, each must be willing to receive him. His presence is never given undesired. I have not yet appealed for higher help. My ambition is to lead these weak souls upward through the strength entrusted to me. Can you suggest anything that would possibly reach him?
His mother. May I bring her? He thought a moment reflectively and then said,
A woman's intuition, yes. Bring her.
I soon was on my way. I found the poor woman, laid the facts gently before her, and waited for her decision. There was no hesitancy on her part. In an instant she said, My poor boy, certainly I will go with you at once. We found my father waiting for us and went immediately to the great home, where these students, as we called them, stayed. It was a beautiful great building in the midst of a park with shaded walks and fountains and flowers everywhere. To one just freed from earth, it seemed a paradise indeed. But to those of us who had tasted heaven's rarer joys, something was wanting. We missed the lovely individual homes, the little children playing on the lawns, the music of the angel choir. It was tame indeed beside the pleasures we had tasted. We found the young man seated beneath one of the flower-laden trees, intently reading a book that my father had left with him. There was a peaceful look on his pale face, but it was rather the look of patient resignation than of ardent joy. His mother approached him alone. My father and I remained in the background. After a minute, he glanced up and saw his mother standing near him. A startled look came on his face, and he stood to his feet. She extended her arms to him and cried out, "John, my dear boy, come home with me. I need you." That was all. With a low cry, he knelt at her feet and clasped her knees, sobbing, "Mother, Mother." She stooped and put her arms around him. She drew his head gently to her breast and showered kisses on his bowed head. Oh, the warm mother love, the same in earth and heaven. Only the Christ love can exceed it. I saw my father turn his head to conceal his emotion, and I knew my own eyes were wet. My father had explained to the mother that the first thing to be accomplished was to get her son to the river, so we now heard her say gently, "Come, John, take the first step upward for your mother's sake, that in time I may have the joy of seeing you in our own home. Come, John, come with mother." She gently drew him, and to our great joy, we saw him rise and go with her, and their steps led them to the river. They walked hand in hand, and as far as we could see them, they seemed to be soothing and comforting him.
"Thank God," my father said fervently. "There will be no further trouble now. When they return, he will see with clearer vision."
And so it proved to be. After this, by divine permission, I became much of the time a co-laborer with my father. and greatly enjoyed his company and his instruction much oftener than I otherwise would have been able.